right. Hey, everybody. Welcome into our weekly live streams. This is our Money Doesn't Grow on Trees series. And I'm Casey Whitener, your Libertarian candidate for the U.S. Senate seat here in the state of South Carolina. Biggest news making headlines, of course, since late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, is the recent passing of our incumbent Senator Lindsey Graham. He was a longtime senator, a longtime statesman in South Carolina, served our state for over 30 years. He will be sorely missed. Mostly, I've just been feeling really sad the last few days, really sad that we have lost such a great patriot for us, for our state, and also in thinking about his family and the people who loved him, who were very close to him, his family, his friends, his staff, of all of those folks who are in my prayers and with just the deepest sympathy and condolences I can have for them. So thank you for your service, Senator Graham, wherever you are. And we were grateful to you. Certainly our state, very grateful to you for what you were able to do for us for all those years. So of course, this race is about the seat that he has now vacated. And in the news also is what will happen next. The Republicans have lost their nominee, so they will be looking for a new one. There's a special election planned on August 11th for that. All of that, who's in the fray, who's throwing their hats in the ring, all that stuff, not my circus, not my monkeys. So not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that. Just be aware that that's going on here in South Carolina. And in the meantime, we have a campaign to run, and this has mostly to answer the questions that I got a lot on Sunday and Monday. Has not changed our focus at all. Our focus for this campaign has been the national debt from the very beginning. So the Casey for U.S. Senate campaign continues to truck forward as far as that's concerned. We didn't have a lot of campaign events planned over the weekend. We had a bunch of administrative stuff we wanted to catch up on. So if you haven't been out to the website recently, CaseySouthCarolina.com, you'll see that there's two new web pages. One of them is Casey in Action, and that is all the videos that we've been collecting. It includes me on a bunch of other people's podcasts, as well as these live streams and the previous series live streams, which was the Not My Circus live streams from May and June. So you can get all the video content there. It also includes a press conference that we held when we first got back from the beach a couple weeks ago, welcoming my opponents to the ballot. And that speech actually is still pretty evergreen. So I don't think I mentioned them by name. So there you go. So you can go and check that out. We were grateful to have that at the Columbia Flag and Sign over on Gervais Street. So what else is going on? Well, we did that one page, and then we also added our financial reports to the website. So you can click on financials for Casey, South Carolina, and you can see our general ledger in 2025 and also the general ledger to date here in 2026, which brings me to there's also a link to my FEC report. So you can just go right to it. You can see how much money we've raised, how much money we've spent, how all that's being classified. And that brings me to my campaign star of the week, which is Jeff Dimmitt. He is my treasurer, and he filed our Q2 report this week. So thank you very much to Jeff for meeting that filing deadline. You're a rock star, buddy. I appreciate you. I send him all the reports that I generate out of things like DonorBox and QuickBooks and everything else. And then he pulls it all together and gives it to the FEC. So thank you, Jeff, for doing that. I appreciate you being my reporting guru. All right. The third piece before we get to our special guest for tonight is our shill of the week. And it took me a little bit on this too, because I kept thinking about all the people who are jumping into this conversation about how to replace Senator Graham and who's going to replace Senator Graham. And these conversations started early. I mean, like early, like indecently early, where most of us should have been thinking about how sad we were and feeling, which is where I was, right? I went to church Sunday morning, prayed for his family, feeling very sad about poor Senator Graham. And then, of course, the missed opportunity for him to be able to work through the end of his term. But a lot of other people were already on social media declaring their intentions to get back into the race. So I thought about calling those people out, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to let them we'll just let them do their thing. Instead, I'd like to think about the people who are moving forward on a bill that they are now calling the Graham Tariff Act, which would levy tariffs on states that are buying oil from Russia. So you know that he was in Ukraine right before he passed on Saturday, and part of this tariff act was being finalized while he was there. You can read a little bit more about it. I'll put some links in the YouTube clip there so you can find it. But basically what this is meant to do is to block Americans from buying Russian debt or doing business with the Russian government or its energy sector. It's also supposed to put about 100% tariffs imposed on purchasers of Russian oil, including China, India, Slovakia, Hungary, and Azerbaijan. And the top 5 purchasers of Russian natural gas, which is China, France, Belgium, Japan, and Hungary. So this is legislation that's going to tariff countries that are contributing to the Russian economy in a way of punishing Russia for its war with Ukraine. Look, I commend wanting to cut off the economic support for the war. I get that. I understand that we want that. But this specific legislation includes giving the president sole discretion on who gets exempted from these tariffs, and that to me looks like enabling taxation to come from the executive branch. So I'm going to go with Congress has got to stop ceding their power. I'm going to go with tariffs don't ever really solve any problems. I'm just going to go with no on this. And there's 26 co-signers on this bill already. And I understand from their speeches and things like that, this was some of Senator Graham's precious legislation, but it probably would have been one that I would have disagreed with him as well. And in this case, I disagree with the folks that are getting behind it. So there you go. There's your shill of the week. It's this Graham Tariff Act. I don't think it's a good idea. But speaking of tariffs, I want to bring into the studio now my friend in the economics department from the University of South Carolina's Darla Moore School of Business, Bill Hauk, who is, I want to say you're my go-to on this tariff conversation since last summer when I had you on the More Impact podcast and asked you to explain how these were going to impact South Carolina. And I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes too, so people can see what we were talking about a year ago when the tariffs came down after, what did he call it, Liberation Day in 2020?
Liberation Day, yes.
Yeah, and you and I got on the air and I was like, is this going to work? And instead we were talking about how much foreign direct investment South Carolina receives. So I want you to share that a little bit with our audience. And then we were talking about how this could really negatively impact. And I actually have a couple of stories about that, where we are a year later with some of the negative impacts that we've seen. And then the third piece of this is the question I get all the time when I say the national debt is an existential threat and we have to do something about it. And people say, I thought the tariffs were going to fix the national debt.
Most likely, no. Well, in fact, no. We'll put it bluntly, no. But yes, yeah, no. I mean, I think all of those are excellent points. And first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it this evening. And yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking
let's start
about
with the foreign direct investment, start with the FDI.
Okay, yeah, FDI. So yeah, let's start with the FDI. I mean, South Carolina, I think really, if you go back the last 20, 25 years, has really transformed its economy as a big source for foreign direct investment, by which we mean companies coming in from overseas, setting up factories here in South Carolina, employing South Carolina citizens, all of the various supply chains and supporting jobs to go along with that. BMW, of course, is the star example going back a little ways, but, we also have companies like Volvo, Michelin. I mean, Boeing is technically a foreign company, but it's so international, it might as well be. I mean, all of these companies are coming into South Carolina, setting up manufacturing facilities. And part of the reason that they're willing to do that is because we have this very nice port down in Charleston that they can first import a lot of the intermediate goods that they need from overseas, whether that be raw materials, sometimes, components coming in from the company's home countries. And then, once they make those goods, they can, export them back out to markets all around the world. And, throwing lots of tariffs on imports of goods into the United States and into South Carolina in particular is going to throw a huge monkey wrench in all of that process.
And we've seen that already. I was just chatting with one of our libertarian friends up in the upstate earlier today, and he was sharing with me some of the impacts for the company that he works for, which is a manufacturing company in the upstate. He was saying that of 5 of the contracts that they had before 2025, 3 of them have been canceled and 2 of them have slowed down and been put on hold. They have reduced their workforce by about 60 to 70%. So we're seeing people who've lost their jobs. He was also saying that some of the folks that didn't lose their jobs nevertheless took a pay cut, either in their existing firm or when they did go find employment elsewhere, they had to take jobs that were $6 to $7 less in their industry or in their field. So it's as much as it may not be that those folks are completely out of work, they are getting paid less in other firms. He also said he had a guy that was making $17 an hour that now makes 19, and then somebody that had a $26 an hour that's now getting a job elsewhere for only 19. So some of these things are just sort of, they're a little bit anecdotal, but this is just one firm that was impacted. He was talking about how their own contracts were put on hold as people were waiting to see whether or not the tariffs were going to stick, whether they were going to be repealed. We had the Supreme Court ruling earlier in the summer that basically said they were not legitimate. And so now there's this idea of whether or not you can go back and get your money back. But the administration has said they're not going to come and refund you that money. You have to go and chase it down. So there's this whole process of going to find the money and get the money back. Like there's just, it's like this weird quagmire that's happening right now. None of which, by the way, is good for the national debt or is racking up some kind of extra dough and stuffing it into the treasury.
Yeah. No, I mean, just the tariffs in themselves were pretty bad in themselves. But I think when we take a lot of the policy uncertainty that was created, are these tariffs going to stick? Are they not? Somebody going to negotiate an exemption for some of them? Are they not? All of that, I mean, it freezes up a lot of economic activity. So even though, yeah, I mean, you've got some great anecdotes there, but you also the thing that's not maybe as visible is all of the contracts and so forth that don't get written up, all of the exchanges that don't happen, that could have happened because of, yes, both the tariffs and the political uncertainty surrounding them.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it's been a real challenge over the last year or so. So when we think about the impact, and we chatted a little bit about this offline, but there's basically 3 ways for us to address this national debt issue. The first way is to raise revenue, which would be taxation. We've got to increase revenue. It could be partly also getting rid of fraud, so that and getting rid of some of these loopholes, but taxation is kind of the way to raise revenue. The second is to cut spending to reduce our overall expenses. And the third way is to grow the economy. Politicians don't want to raise taxes. They absolutely don't want to cut spending. So they mostly rely on growing the economy, which is like this weird way of just sort of wishing the debt away. Can you talk a little bit about how the tariffs what the impact of tariffs are on this grow the economy strategy?
Yeah, well, I think that, yeah, and as we were talking about offline before we came on the air, tariffs really don't help with any 3 of those things. They're not going to, I mean, they'll raise some revenue. We can get to the revenue numbers in a little bit, but they're not going to raise significantly enough to make a huge dent in the national debt. They're certainly not going to help cut spending. And yeah, I mean, they're not going to help with economic growth either. I mean, sometimes we don't always see tariffs as being a tax because they're kind of paid by somebody else out there. We don't have to file a form with the government every year telling them how much we paid in tariffs and all of that. But that doesn't mean that somebody's not paying them. Uh, they Some of that money we see in the form of higher prices for consumer goods that might come in from overseas or use a lot of materials that are imported from overseas. Company profits can get squeezed because they have this extra bill whenever they import goods from overseas. Well, yeah, it's going to they're going to have to pay this extra tax on top of it. Now, I think, a reasonable question that people sometimes ask is, all right, well, okay, yeah, you got to pay this tax if you import stuff from overseas. Can't you just switch to a domestic supplier? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But a big part of the reason that you're probably importing stuff from overseas to begin with is that the combination of cost and quality was better from whoever your overseas supplier was. And so, you switch. First of all, it's hard for supply chains to switch on a dime, but even if you can, it's going to drive your costs up. So, yeah, none of that is going to be useful for economic growth. It's going to make it harder for domestic firms to produce goods if they have international supply chains. It's going to mean domestic consumers got to spend more money on goods and services coming in from overseas, which means they have less money to spend on everything else. And so all of that is going to hurt economic growth within the United States. So yeah, I mean, tariffs, they're a tax like anything else. You tax something, you tend to get less of it, and it tends to slow down that part of the economy. And South Carolina, as I mentioned earlier, has become this, really kind of a rock star in terms of becoming integrated into the international economy. And yeah, tariffs are going to hurt that.
When we think about this, the idea behind the tariffs, or sort of some of the justification for it, was to try to encourage supply chains to move back onshore, to try to offer some opportunity for American entrepreneurs to open up shops, to go back and build these kinds of manufacturing or supply chain elements. Has any of that materialized? I mean, and that's a really long play. I mean, it takes years to get the capital to outfit these manufacturing facilities, to hire people, to train workers. Like, it's not like we said, hey, we want to onshore stuff, and tomorrow we flip the switch and all these things get onshored.
Yeah.
It takes just as much time for them, having fled the United States, to come back to the United States. Have we seen any economic activity in that space?
I mean, not really, no. What we have seen a little bit in the last decade or so, I mean, especially starting about 2018 or so, is that there's much less investment going into China specifically. So some of those supply chains are moving a little bit out of China, mostly going to other countries in Asia, not really so much coming back to the United States. Sometimes they do. If Where we have seen supply chains coming back to the U.S. is in areas where there's heavy automation. That it's not necessarily American workers who are making a lot of stuff. It's American robots, which, I mean, okay, good. But yeah, I mean, but the amount is not huge in itself, and I think really in the last year or so you haven't seen much of that. Again, not only because well, there's the tariffs, but there's also the uncertainty. Nobody really knows if they're going to stick around. It's really hard for a lot of firms to plan. And yeah, as you said, it doesn't happen quickly, and it's not something that's going to happen if it requires a large investment hinging on a policy that may not stick around too long. So yeah, I mean, all of that policy uncertainty has really hindered even, I think the benefit that people were hoping to get from that.
Yeah, one of our economic forum conversations back in December with Joey Van Nussen's team was all about that uncertainty, and he was saying that was the one thing he could guarantee, was that we were going to see some additional uncertainty in 2026. Can we talk about the reciprocal tariffs and the U.S. exports? So when you and I talked last summer, you were saying that while we might have a trade deficit in physical goods, we actually have a trade surplus in services
Yeah.
and consulting services, things like that, intellectual properties, education. Can you talk a little bit about that how those two tend to balance each other out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we always need to remember about international trade is when we are importing goods and services in from overseas, well, that means that other countries have dollars that they can now spend on American things. Now, typically, what America has been very good at producing are various types of services, whether, yeah, consulting, financial services, education. So I think, what a lot of overseas consumers have bought, not so much, not quite as much with the U.S. manufactured goods, so a bit of that, but they tend to spend it on a lot of various service exports that the U.S. Tends to do pretty well in. The other thing is that they take a lot of that money and they buy up U.S. financial assets, including government debt. To bring it back to that topic. So that means, it's one more source where we're able to kind of, help finance this increasingly gargantuan deficit,
Mhm.
which, without that source of financing, we'd probably be in even more trouble than we are currently. But, it's not helping that much. Yeah.
And it's not healthy either for
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
people to own our
Exactly.
debt.
Exactly.
We talked in previous episodes about the United States economy, well, our government bringing in about $5.5 trillion a year and turning around and spending about $7 trillion a year. So constantly running that deficit about $1.5 trillion a year. And of course, it's grown. We're nearing $40 trillion for this. The interest alone has become one of the biggest things that we're paying. One of the biggest expenditures is us just servicing the debt that we're currently in. What fixes this? How do we, number one, can it be fixed? And then number two, how do we do it? Like, is this even possible, or should, everybody just throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Well, it can be done. I think the thing we always need to realize is that the longer we kick the can down the road, is that the more and more painful it gets. Because
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's you bring up the interest. To me, that's the scariest part of it now, is that we're now paying about $1 trillion in interest every year, which is more than we spend on national defense. It's actually, I believe, now more than we spend on Medicare. I think Social Security is the only item of the budget that's we spend more on now, and that's only going to go up. Both because we haven't really gotten the deficit, the year to year new borrowing that we do, under control, and then also we had this kind of bout from about 2008 to 2020 ish, where we had very, very low interest rates. So we were able to borrow at very low interest rates. But now, as the existing debt rolls over, we're now paying like 4 or 5% interest, and so the kind of the weighted interest rate that we have to pay on the existing debt is getting higher over time as well. So yeah, I mean, the interest payments are, I think the projection is that they're, just going to keep going up and up, for the foreseeable future. So yeah, how do we fix that? There's a lot of things that could potentially work. None of them are going to be politically popular, but, at
It's
some
okay.
point,
I,
yeah.
I don't have to be politically popular,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
as an
And
outsider third party candidate, I can basically say all the things that need to get said
exactly.
because it's a long shot for people to elect me anyway, right?
Yeah,
So let's
yeah.
talk.
But
Let's be real about this. Is it
yeah.
possible? Can we do it? And how bad is it going to hurt?
Well, I think the the sort of third rail thing is that we like to think that it can be done without cutting anything that we like, um, but that's just not going to happen. I think we talk about waste, fraud, abuse, and government spending, and sure, it's there, and sure, I think where you can find it, you should definitely target it. But it's not like there's this big line item in the federal budget that says waste, fraud, abuse. We
Yeah.
could just kind of cut that out. Yeah, it's stuff that happens in programs that are popular, like Social Security, like in Medicare, like in defense
Mhm.
spending, and all of those things that we either really like the government doing, or at least have gotten very used to the government doing. And trying to cut them is obviously going to be politically unpopular. I think really one of the trickiest things, I really healthcare spending, and it's not even just a matter of government healthcare spending; it's healthcare spending across the board, the entire industry.
Sure.
Um, But yeah, I mean, Medicare and to Medicaid to some extent, I mean, the amounts that are both, I mean, they're large amounts, but then they've been growing considerably over time. And I think, kind of various reforms that could maybe try to rein that in. But, of course, by reforms, I mean being stingier about spending on them.
Hmm.
And, I mean, maybe, things like means testing Social Security, or, gradually weaning off people who maybe don't need as much Social Security. I mean, those are the types of things that'll make a huge dent on the spending side.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sure none of the libertarians in the audience want to hear this, but there may have to be, if not tax rate increases, at least, ending of various types of exemptions, deductions, and all of that sort of stuff to raise revenue until we get things under control. That's the only way
I
I
want to
see this
just
happening.
I just want to make sure people heard this. So, number one, Social Security reforms, right?
Yeah.
Probably going to need a bipartisan commission that can recommend reforms that we're all just going to have to go with, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to like the political
Yeah.
repercussions
No,
of
no,
them.
no.
Medicare reforms and eliminating as much waste and fraud as we possibly can in Medicare. I've been saying we need to decouple healthcare or health insurance from employment so that we don't need Medicare ultimately, that people can keep their own health insurance all the way through retirement. So we need to
Right.
consider that. And then the third thing I heard you say was to consider that. I just lost it. I was there on the third thing.
Revenue, yeah, I mean,
Oh, the revenue.
yeah, revenue. I
So
mean, not
simplifying the tax
necessarily higher
code.
tax rates, but yeah, ending certain
Simplify that
exemptions,
tax code.
deductions, yeah, all of that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yep.
This is me sort of means testing my own plans for how to do this debt thing with you, an
Yep.
economist. And I'm grateful to you for being here. So thank you so much, Bill. Is there anything you're working on that you'd like to promote to our audience so they know?
I mean, I guess the one thing we never quite got to is, tariffs. They raise some revenue, but I think, we need to make sure that we understand the magnitude is not enough to make a meaningful dent in the national debt. Last year, fiscal year 2025, tariffs raised about $195 billion, which, sounds like a lot of money until you compare it to everything else in the government. Um, if we're talking like a $1.9 trillion deficit, that's, like not even a tenth really of the deficit.
Right.
And that was a record. And it's going to be, considerably lower this year now that the quote unquote IEPA tariffs have been
Hmm.
struck down by the Supreme Court. So there's going to be less tariff revenue this year. And even if you tried to come up with a way to try to max out tariff revenue, I can't see a way that you get more than like $400 or $500 billion a year out of it. And that's with kind of the tariff rates that would be pretty high. That would be pretty bad for the economy, I think, in general. But once you start raising the tariff rates higher, you get kind of a Laffer curve effect where, well, people just stop importing stuff, and if you don't import stuff, you
Right.
don't get any tariff revenue. So yeah, there's going to be a
And
pretty
as
hard limit on how much
and
you
as
can
we talked
actually
about
get.
before, we see companies losing contracts. They're then laying off people. And then, of course, most of those tariffs get passed through to our consumers when they actually buy the product. So corporations, I mean, everybody wants to say corporations need to pay more in taxes, but we know corporations don't really pay taxes because they pass those taxes through to consumers. They pass them through to all of us. And either we suffer because we've been laid off because our company can't afford to keep operating, or we suffer because the products that they're producing, even the services they're producing, get more expensive because they're having to pay taxes. I mean, that's what corporations do. They just pass those taxes right through. It always ends up being people who pay the taxes at the end of the day. So, well, thank you, Bill, for being here. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be
All
here.
right. Have a great rest of your summer, and I'll see you on campus in the fall.
Thanks. Have a good evening. Good luck.
All right. See ya. Okay. Economics 101, y'all. I went through Economics 101 last summer on the More Impact podcast. We actually did it on live radio on 100.7 The Point. Dr. Hauk helped me. Also, Jason DeBacker came on and helped me. I had a bunch of great interviews on that More Impact podcast. I'll put the link in the YouTube section so you guys can see how to get more of those More Impact episodes. It was a chance for me to really brush up on some of those economic concepts and then figure out how I can talk to our like regular folks about them so we can really put them in an understandable way. Keep in mind, right, like that sometimes the debt conversation, the debt is so big and it seems like so insurmountable that people think, well, I don't really understand it. I don't really know much about it. I don't really know what to do with it. And the most important thing to remember is that every issue is a debt issue. Everything is more expensive because we owe money. And if we can get that under control, if we can get that spending under control, we can improve our credit rating. We can negotiate better rates on the loans that we already have. If we can stop the growth of that debt, specifically on programs like Social Security and Medicare, we can try to get it under control. But we're going to have to do all three things. We're going to have to increase revenue. We're going to have to decrease spending, and we're going to have to grow the economy. And tariffs don't do any of those things. So we cannot tariff our way out of this. All right. Last piece for you guys paying attention. I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, I'm sorry I forgot to add the Facebook broadcast at the beginning. So we're about 12 minutes in before I threw us on Facebook. So I apologize for those of you who came through us to us through Facebook that you missed a little bit of the beginning. The beginning stuff included the new pages on the website, which include my financial reports for the campaign. Feel free to take a look at those. Send me any questions or any thoughts that you have on that. I promise you nobody else is putting up their general ledger on the for their campaign website, but I believe in full transparency. So there you have it. And then the FEC reports are linked there as well. And then the other is there's a brand new blog out there that talks about why campaigns are raising money, why they need to raise money and what that looks like, and then how we've gone about doing it. The title of the blog is The Business of Our Campaign. And I would appreciate if you take a look at the blog, leave a comment on the blog, share it anywhere you can. I know that our team has already put it on Reddit. It would be great if I could see it out there on Twitter, out there on YouTube. We're broadcasting live on Twitch tonight for the first time ever. So if this is your first introduction to the campaign through our Twitch channel, by all means, please check out the website and also check out that blog for some additional reading on exactly how we're going about building the business of the campaign. It's an entrepreneurial story, this campaign, and I'm really very, very proud of it. All right, lastly, Peach Festival this weekend. Anybody in the upstate, come out to Gaffney for the Peach Festival. We're going to be there riding in the parade. Y'all know I love a parade. Cannot wait to sit on the back of Lizzie, my Mazda MX-5, and ride through the parade this weekend. We'll be giving out bubbles like we did in Hampton County. They were a big hit, so excited to give out bubbles for all the kids. And of course, we'll have, hoping to have these fans that I mentioned last week, hoping to have these for our people out in Gaffney because it's very, very hot. So hoping to have those, waiting for them to arrive, hopefully by Friday, so we can bring them to you in Gaffney. Thank you so much for supporting us always at parades and other live events. And of course, digital people, you guys got to be out there. Anytime they talk about this race on the news, they're talking about it because of the tragic passing of Senator Lindsey Graham at the beginning of the week. It's all over the news. Every time you read an article about this, if they don't mention Casey Whitener as a candidate for that race, please comment, email, let them know. I am on the ballot on November 3rd, and they ought to be mentioning me alongside my Democratic opponent. And eventually, of course, we'll have another Republican in the race as well. So three-way race coming up November 3rd. Thank you so much always for your support. Money doesn't grow on trees, friends. Thanks again to Bill Hauk for being here, and I will see you all next week.